sort of fact. And if she says black, I say white. If she sees a circle, I see a square. It happens. But it all depends about how we quit that turning into an argument. And we are primarily doing this for someone whom you love, and that person loves you, and it's really not worth it. And this was another story that I came across while I was preparing. This was at the airport. There were a couple of lines, and there was a couple arguing, "Hey, let's go on this line. It's shorter. Let's go on this line. It's going quicker." So the husband stood in one line, which had 12 people, but it was moving fast. The wife stood on the other line, which had 10 people. So both had their own point of this will go faster and this will move faster. And they were hard-headed and not listening or not allowing to listen to their spouse. And it went on and on. "Hey, come on here, this is moving faster, there's only 2 guys in front of me." And the wife says, "Why don't you come here? It's just 1 guy in front of me, it's moving even faster." And the argument went on, and I could picture myself with my wife, and sometimes we do that in Walmart. But eventually what happened was the wife ended up reaching to the counter first. And guess what happened? Well, the husband did not go to the other line. He stood in his own line, and he ended up buying his own ticket. And because he bought, she had to buy her own ticket. And that causes pride, and that causes the strife. And we always think that we need to have it our way, and we need to show constantly, especially to our partner, saying, "I'm right, you're wrong. I'm right, you're wrong." And we kind of end up arguing the smallest thing that's not even worth it. If you look at this couple, how much of a difference would it cost, standing in those 2 lines, a minute or 2? But how do you think the rest of their day went? Not good. It was sour. They had very minimal conversation. It's that little thing that can ruin the rest of the day, just by a minute or 2. So my point here is, let's not be that all I know kind of a person. Let's not be proud about always proving my point. We have to learn to swallow that pride and have that willingness of heart to listen to someone's opinion. And all of this, happy family life, and especially in America, things are, I would speak, is divorce. And most of the divorces today is because they get stirred up on an argument, which is really tiny thing. Deep down in their hearts, they love the other person, but they allow this argument to come into their lives, which just lives in their lives forever. And they don't take the part of how this argument starts. And this includes me, and we kind of, at a point, begin to start each other disrespectfully. And not for too long, it ends up in a bad condition. And there's a verse that talks about this. If someone can go to Mark chapter 3, verse 25. Sorry, can I read it? 3:25. Right, and so a house divided will not stand. Another translation says, a house divided will continually be brought to destruction, and it will not continue to stand. Notice here it says that if we allow strife into a relationship, it is being brought to destruction. In other words, it might not happen overnight. It might not happen next month. It might take even a couple of years, but guess what? It's going down the path of destruction. And why? Because we hold grudges. We make these little comments that are sarcastic. We may not realize, but this relationship is going the wrong way. And that strife is constantly chipping down the foundation of the relationship. And unless we make that decision to change, things are going to go worse. And then, when it's too late, we might sit down alone and say, what have I done? What has happened to my marriage? What am I going to do now? Many of the people today, especially here, are getting divorced not because of a moral failure, not because they were bad people, not because they were not compatible. It's just because they allow that tiny little strife to come into their life, and that messes the whole thing. When it was an opportunity for them to deal with it, they did not allow or walk in love. They did not let go of things. And most importantly, they didn't cover each other's weaknesses. And over time, it has built, and got bigger, and then it ended up being a bad picture. And now, the common thing that happens is like, when they cannot find peace in a relationship or happiness in one relationship, people tend to go into another relationship. But the problem is, if we do not know how to keep strife, or learn how to maintain peace into our life, that strife will follow into our relationship. And one of the common things all of us say is like, again, what I mentioned a while ago is like, only if my wife hadn't heard me, only if my wife hadn't listened to me, things would have been. Well, with all due respect, that's one of the perfect excuses that we give, constantly saying, pointing at others. Coming back again at what God wants each one of us to do. Going back again to Matthew 5:9, He is asking each one of us to be the peacemakers. God is asking us to be that bigger person. Do not wait for the other person to do it. You will be waiting around for your whole life. You can make a difference right now. If you would change and start taking that high roads and start treating the other person with respect, God will begin His work to change the other person. At times it is a shame for us to let the enemy destroy the relationship that God put it together. And what we have to do is primarily humble ourselves and quit allowing the strife into our family. We as a whole have to learn how to value one person in our life whom we love the most, and most importantly, in our relationship with marriage, in our homes, in our families. We have to help, we need God's help in maintaining that relationship, in maintaining that peace in our family. In public, it's kind of easy to be a nice person. My wife sometimes says, you do this in front of others, but not at home. You don't hold my hand there, but why you do that? Well, anybody can do that. That's a common thing. But I'm talking about what's going on behind that closed doors at home. How do we treat people that are closest to you, our spouse, our children, our family, the people that we come across into our day-to-day relationship? That really decides what kind of a person you really are. And that's going to determine what path you're really going in life. And we're in a society where we're lacking respect. We constantly say knowingly, sometimes unknowingly, things that we shouldn't say. When there are certain issues at work or certain issues in family, there's that voice in your heart that says, don't say that. It's not right to open it now. But then we ignore it. We shut down that. It's God in our heart talking, saying, do the right thing. But our body has the control to shoot that off. And we say things that are hurtful. We do things that are hurtful. And it is very sad to see how we treat each other. It is very sad to know what goes behind those closed doors in certain families. And if we are in this area of problem, God is willing to bring the change into our lives. So let's make a decision today that we are going to start loving this person, most importantly our spouse, our family, our closest relative, our children, with respect and honor. And if we cannot do it for our sake, let's do it for their sake. Let's do it for the sake of our family. Let's do it for the sake of our children. Children has become a most important factor in our families. It turns out to be that most of the families are not in sync with God. They're like, I'm with my husband, or I'm with my wife just for the sake of children. No, that's not God wants you to do. God wants a complete family. Our children should grow up in a house that's not filled with argument and strife. And our children should not see how we're treating our spouse with ugliness and disrespectfulness. And we also have to remember that they grow up to be like me. Whenever I end up being in a situation of not being nice to Nancy or doing some kind of thing, there's one guy who's sitting right next to me and watching constantly. He wants to be like me already. He says, I want to be like Papa. He wants to be like, do this thing. So there is one person that is being molded. They're observing him constantly. And we as parents are molding what kind of a life that they're going to live as they grow up. Maybe we did not grow up in a family where there was no strife or argument. You know, some of us, I've seen my parents fight so many times. But let's try and break that bondage. Let's try and break that challenge with God's help, that I will not be like that to my kids. We have to put a full stop to that junk that Satan is trying to bring into our relationship. Let us allow our children to see how we are loving to our spouse, how we are honoring our spouse, how we are being happy together, enjoying every single moment together. And this happens in my house. When I go hug Nancy, he wants to go hug Nancy. If I say something, he wants to do it. And I enjoy seeing that. I see God's love in that little child. It is so important that we have to set examples to our kids. James 3:16 says, where there is strife, there is confusion, rebellion, and kinds of evil. Some of us might wonder, why is my kid like this? I wonder sometimes when Ian is being like a little out of control, why is he like that? Well, he's just a child, he hasn't observed anything yet, but why is my child so rebellious? Why is the question. Well, it could be because of the strife that we allow in our house. It could be because your child is constantly watching we making those little comments about somebody. The enemy constantly wants us to get that strife into our family. He wants to destroy the relationship in our family. But what does God really want you to do? God wants you to start letting go of things. God wants us to be that bigger person. And we have to learn to choose our battles. And some of us might fight over little things that comes along the way that keeps our family stirred up constantly. And you would be a lot more peaceful, and we would enjoy our life a lot more if we started learning how to let go. So next time we are tempted, or even the thought that comes to our mind of making a little comment, we have to think in our mind, is it really worth it? Is it really going to be productive? Or am I just trying to prove my point? Is it really my pride trying to get in there, or is it really necessary of what I'm going to say? And there's a funny thing that I came across again, is like a bulldog can swipe a skunk any day of the week. I don't understand the first time I read it. But then it also makes that decision, is it really worth the stink? In the same way, we can go out there and pour a point all day. I can sit down hours together explaining my wife, this is what the right thing is. But trust me, it doesn't get me anywhere. It doesn't get all of us anywhere. And we have to constantly ask ourselves, is it really worth that stink? Because we've been married for like 6 years. We know each other for 10 years. But all the arguments that have come into our lives always doesn't end up good. it ends up being bad. It ends up being a stink. So Proverbs 23, chapter 20, verse 3 says, avoiding a fight, avoiding an argument is a mark of honor, and only fools insist on quarreling. It is just amazing how strife that we fail to avoid can bring changes into our life. We can just avoid that by just controlling our tongue. We think, I'm right, and I'm going to show that I'm right. And we do that constantly to the fellow people that we work with. But then with God, through God's help, we learn that sometimes, even when I know I'm right, the best thing to do is to keep quiet and let the other person think that they're right. Sometimes, in order to keep the peace, you have to give away the right of you being right. If we do our part to keep the peace, God will be our vindicator. If you take the high roads, God will fight the battle for you. God is asking each one of us again to be the peacemakers of the family. And He's asking each one of us to take that initiative to keep strife out of our family. So let's not wait on the other person. Let's make that decision.